Okay, hello everyone and welcome to Obelisk Live. I'm Laura Vosper, Head of Experience at Obelisk, and today we have three guests, all from our Obelisk community, who are wellbeing professionals as well as lawyers, and they're taking their time today to share with us some of their advice, kind of from lawyers for lawyers, as we work our way through the lockdown. So, Amelia, over to you if you would like to share your slides with us and perhaps start off by just giving us a little bit more of an introduction into who you are and what you do.
So, as Laura was saying, my name's Amelia Yao and I'm a BACP registered counsellor. I'm a lawyer as well and a consultant with Obelisk. So, before counselling, I was a financial services lawyer and I worked for the likes of Linklaters and Evershed Sutherland. And really, my decision to requalify as a counsellor was driven by my broader interest in people, and just on a personal level, really, my own internal processes really interested me. And I really just wanted to think about how our unconscious affects us as well. So I have a counselling practice in London and I also work out of Tunbridge Wells. And I have now moved all of my counselling over to phone or online with my clients. And today, really what I'd like to try and do is talk you through what is really an unprecedented time, I think, for all of us, and a really uncertain experience. So hopefully I can normalize a bit of some of the feelings that you're having and help you to better understand them. So moving on to the next slide. With the onset of this pandemic, I think we can all agree that we are living in really uncertain times. And generally speaking, we don't like too much change at any given time. And yet there has never been a time when there has been more change around. So our lives have been transformed in ways we would never have conceived of at the start of this year. And I'd say it feels even somewhat surreal. And I hear phrases like, it's a bit strange, but we'll get there. And I think this really reflects what's going on around us, that there is still this shock and there is this feeling of, well, this is our new normal, but it actually doesn't feel very normal at all still. And I think there is a deep level of impact with this virus on our psyches, if you like, and our sense of mental health and well-being. And I'd like to describe this almost as an existential question of, will we survive this? So our core sense of selves is being shaken, and so we might on an unconscious level be questioning how we can actually go on being during this time and if we will survive it. So we could name it, we could say this is a traumatic experience we're all going through. And the core of a traumatic experience has really the question, will I get through it? I think it's important to name what we're going through, because if we acknowledge it, that way we stand a better chance of understanding what's happening to us and addressing our needs right now. I think we feel the virus is a threat to all of us, and the uncertainty and the fear it evokes is made worse by the fact it's something we can't see. We don't know much about it, and there's a big question mark about our futures and what that's going to look like. Our trust in what we hold familiar, what is dear to us, is really being shaken up. Now, I'd like to look at COVID and how it affects us a bit more. So there's a macro level, if you like, a cultural context where we'd already been experiencing high levels of uncertainty before the virus because of things like Brexit. And then on a micro level, individuals will experience this according to their own personal circumstances before the virus. So some people might have been going through a divorce or illness or a bereavement, say, where their own internal resources were already under strain and feeling quite a bit of uncertainty as a result. So with this in mind, it would then be okay for people to feel vulnerable during this time or very overwhelmed, And this is especially so if you'd experienced some sort of mental health problem in the past, or experienced trauma even, or have a physical health condition. And I think COVID has highlighted how we are connected in ways that we weren't even really aware of. And I've put on the slide here a picture of a spider's web, because with a spider's web, you can see the threads sometimes and how they weave together. But sometimes you can't. They are there, and each thread relates to the other to form this entire web of our lives and how we all interconnect with each other. So with the virus, these threads, I think, have been put on hold for a while. They feel a bit frozen, and in some situations they've been ripped through, and very suddenly. So what happens when things feel uncertain and you don't know what's going to happen next? Well, for starters, there's a very natural reaction of feeling fearful and anxious. And then with a worldwide pandemic, it's natural to feel this a lot more. And the way we respond will be on a spectrum. So for some, it might trigger quite deep anxiety, and for other people, there'll be a state of shock and denial, and some people will want to just escape the situation and run, if you like. There's quite a bit of paranoid thinking around at the moment. So with what we're talking about, I'd call this a fight, flight, or freeze response that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's a bit like the scenario of the caveman meeting the saber-toothed tiger all over again, but with lots of tigers being involved now. It's our nervous system saying, act now, think later. And I think at the beginning of this crisis, what we saw was a lot of panic buying and the fights that we saw to a degree in the supermarkets over things like toilet roll, and that's why we were seeing those sorts of responses. Now, our threat system is there for good reason, and it's really natural that this has been activated. It's being vigilant of danger. That's what it's built to do. So we might see other feeling responses shutting down more, and in a bid to protect themselves, we might have seen people becoming or behaving in a more selfish way, or more aggressively, or less trusting, more competitive, less empathic. And for some, these sorts of survival responses might feel familiar as they have encountered trauma before. So other feelings, of course, have come in though, and we've experienced a range of problems with lockdown. So we have people living on their own, feeling isolated, and even feeling this could be more of a problem than the virus itself. There are people feeling a bit depressed, overwhelmed, and of course grieving. There's a lot of loss around. And I've seen increases in addictions and compulsive behaviors. So I know, for example, with myself, I really like chocolate. I'm definitely eating more chocolate just going through this virus, a bit of comfort eating, if you like. People are losing their jobs. They're worrying about finances. We've also got other behaviors popping up. So I don't know, maybe you find yourself cleaning a bit more or reading the news obsessively. Generally speaking, I'd say whatever your coping strategy was before lockdown, this is going to become more exaggerated, if you like, during this time. And if you are struggling, then speak to someone you can trust. There is professional help available, so do reach out for it. And you can contact your GP, there's Samaritan's Mind, or indeed a counsellor. And if you want more on this, please do get in touch with me. People are behaving and feeling like this because it's an extremely anxiety-provoking situation, and we want to feel safe. So going back to that fight, flight, freeze response, it's there to get us to safety, when there's danger around. So what else do we do to feel safe? Well, as naturally social animals, we look for safety and predictability by seeking out others. And research has shown that this is the first thing we do when faced with a threat. So in this situation, contact, especially meaningful contact with another and a support network, is really key. And studies have shown that the single most important protection against trauma is a good support network. And during this time, as we all know, we've had to find other ways to do this. But even hugging a pet, if you have one, can help with this. So I have a dog, I know for sure she's been getting way more than her fair share of hugs at the moment. This sort of physical contact, this engagement, it's releasing dopamine and oxytocin. That's what's happening. And these happy hormones are bringing these stress levels, the cortisol, that we've all been feeling down. So, for example, when there's a natural disaster or an accident, it's important that the emotional bonds survivors have to their loved ones is re-established as quickly as possible. And it's our emotional bonds that provide the best level of protection and safety in the face of threat. But right now, of course, we need to be more creative about this. Research also shows that some people will have more of that fight-flight response triggered because they haven't been able to tap into that social support system and find safety and someone to trust in it. All the danger just feels too immediate and the body needs to act fast. And like I said, we're all on a complex spectrum of response. Some people are naturally going to find it harder to reach out to others. And I fully recognize this can be hard. And again, I'd reiterate there is professional help available. And also I give some suggestions later about tapping into inbuilt skills we have about how to help alleviate anxiety and stress. So now that I've given you an understanding of what you're experiencing, we just need to talk a bit about how to deal with it. And reaching out to people that you feel connected to at this time is really important, because this is where we can build that sense of trust again. And this is important because it helps us feel that sense of threat reducing down. It's reinforcing those emotional bonds that I spoke of just a little while ago. We are all becoming familiar with Zoom and all sorts of innovative ways to connect. Connection in the form of even simply being present for someone else is helpful. And those social cues that we were getting when face-to-face with someone can be incorporated within a Zoom call or a phone call. And this is just about being a bit more conscious of that mirroring back we are giving to each other, or even our intonation. So suggesting presence and engagement in a call, this will help us feel more connected and accessible to someone else. It's also helpful to simply give what people are going through a name, to recognize it and then address it. So we could say, you know, this is a fearful time, or this is a traumatic time. These are really extraordinary times. So take a while just to take this in a bit, and a level of self-awareness will help to start processing some of these difficult experiences and feelings. That said, we all tend to have a negative bias anyway, so be aware of this as well, because for our predecessors, it was put in place to protect and to survive. Self-care, creating routines, they all bring more certainty into your daily mix, and a sense of control will help to mitigate the feeling of threat. And it's important now more than ever to try and take care of yourself. And I know this might be difficult for some, but there is truth in putting your own oxygen mask on first, if you are to take care of others effectively. It is okay to be kind to yourself, I would say, and feel whatever you're feeling. So lower the crossbar and those high standards if that's around for you. I would encourage at this point really thinking about a standard of good enough and just doing what you can. And I've covered this in the Obelisk blog recently with a piece on perfectionism and how it can impact lawyers especially, and how it would impact lawyers during lockdown. So if you'd like more information on that, please go there. So what to do? Create positivity. So in this trying situation, there may be times in which you feel unable to create positivity. I can give some examples about how you might. And this really isn't a prescriptive list at all. So I've mentioned things like practicing gratitude, or using humor, or enjoying being in nature. And what I'm trying to say here is the key here is really to create a sense of containment and safety in your own minds, a space for processing stress that might feel that bit safer. I see it a bit like anchor points in your day, if you like, that help you feel safer, because it's a bit like being at sea at the moment. So do whatever works for you. There are also ways to access how to feel better in our bodies that will then support this emotional regulation that we need. And we have inbuilt skills within to help feel more balanced. We can train this very aroused nervous system through things like calm breathing and yoga and mindfulness. And I know Vrinda is going to talk about this more. So with creating our own narratives, this is about becoming just a little bit more aware of the stories we have in our minds about who we are and about how you relate to yourself and others. So it's about starting to think about what you're telling yourself. Does it hold up to scrutiny? Are you being too hard on yourself, maybe? And by doing this, it can create some room for positivity and hope. So it's a bit like reframing your thoughts. So you could affirm, this will pass and you will survive this. So for lawyers listening, I'd say lockdown also too needn't be something that is to be worked at, in case there's a bit of that around or compared to another. It is very much we're all making this up as we go along. I heard on the radio the other day, what if lockdown could also mean slowdown? And I think if you can, I'm saying only if you can, this is a real opportunity for some reflection, for becoming aware of how we all connect to each other, because those connections have changed, but only if you can. And this goes back to being kind to yourself. So to sum up, I would say there's never been a time when we need to have more contact. But because of social distancing, we need to adapt and find new ways to do this. I think anything that can go away to recognizing your needs right now is helpful. And I would say we are all in this together. And I say this because I know I have definitely taken the smallest things, like just being able to pop to the shops, for granted. But I feel there's never also been a time where we have, I think, felt so united in what we've lost for now, and what gives our lives meaning really going forward. And now back to you, Laura.
Amelia, thank you so much for sharing with us there. I particularly like the way you brought this idea about reflecting on our connections, because I'm sure I'm not alone in having, sort of reached out to family, friends, colleagues over the past few weeks, and and actually the idea of reflecting a bit more actively about, are the connections missing? Are the connections that I want to put more time and attention into? The actual act of taking some time to do that,
Yeah.
really resonates with me, and I'm sure with lots of those listening to us as well. Now, we are tight for time. I haven't seen any questions coming in from our guests, but what I would like to just end with, if I may, is a question for myself, which I'd just like to hear thoughts from each of you, just briefly on, which is, as we approach the sort of new normal, do you think, having been through this experience, we are going to be thinking differently as a profession, as a community, as individuals, about well-being, and how important it is to be purposeful with considering our well-being? Amelia, let's start with you, if I may.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think what this virus and lockdown has shown to us, which is what I talked about, was that spider's web. So there's a very stark contrast with, what we're missing out on now and what we had before. So there is a real opportunity here. And I appreciate it can sometimes be hard because some of us might still be feeling very anxious, but there's a real opportunity to try and reflect on where we've come from and where we want to go. And if we can find those spaces in which to take a step back and digest what's been going on, and even do that with someone else, that's a great way to do that.
Thank you. And I think on that note, thinking about the future and opportunities, and finding a note of positivity, I think we'll close there for today. Amelia, Julian, Verinda, thank you so much for taking your time today to share your advice and insights. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today to listen in, and I hope everybody can stay safe and well.